Hello, welcome to the Nature's Nexus podcast. Here, we're all about connecting anyone and everyone with our environment. We'll aim to do this through sharing knowledge and discussing various topics that show people how they can be better connected to nature and the world we live in. At the end of each episode, we'll also provide some actionable steps that anybody can take to help make our world a better place. I believe that the impact of everyday people can be profound if we all act and strive to leave the world in a better way than we found it, especially our environment. We'll try to keep things enlightening, informative and educational, whilst not getting too heavy on the info and topics presented. I'd love anyone and everyone to be able to listen and enjoy tuning in. I hope we can be the nexus between you and the beautiful world we live in and so rely on. This is Jessica York bringing you another episode of Nature's Nexus. Let's go. Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of the Nature's Nexus podcast. Today we are talking about the influence of agriculture on nature and our guest is Dr Gundula Rhoades, or Gundi for short. So welcome Gundi, thank you so much for being with us on the podcast today.
Hi Jess, nice that you're doing this. Super good.
Thank you. Cool. So Gundi, before I do your bio and introduce you to everybody, I'd just like to ask all my guests a couple of quick questions at the start of the episode. So I might just ask you those couple of quick questions if that's okay. So the first question is, what is it you love most about our natural world?
Oh, the beauty of it and how it is so perfectly all interconnected and wise and amazing, and it just keeps going, and it is just absolutely gorgeous, beautiful. Look at that.
Awesome.
Best planet.
Definitely. I love how you mentioned the connected part too, because I think the ecology of nature is it's very cool how everything's linked and connected. Yeah. Okay. And the second question is, how do you get connected to nature, or when do you feel the most connected to nature?
Well, when I'm outside. And when I think hiking, like hiking wherever, walking on the beach, going for a swim in the ocean, like anything where I immerse myself. And even in my garden, skiing in the Alps, or, like anything, any outdoor activity.
Yeah.
Camping,
Yeah. Lots of different ways. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you for that. All right. Well, everyone, I'll give you a bit of an introduction to Gundi. Okay. So Dr. Gundi Rhoades has been a veterinarian for over 33 years, 22 of that in her own country practice in the rural town of Inverell in New South Wales, Australia. In her clinic that currently employs 5 veterinarians and 6 nurses, she treats livestock as well as pets. As a mixed practice vet, her knowledge is extensive, ranging from internal medicine, dermatology, dentistry, orthopedics, reproduction, ophthalmology, surgery in diverse species, to being on farms and pregnancy testing cattle all day. She lived and managed a cattle property, first with, then without her husband for many years, breeding Angus bulls. In those years, she became an expert in regenerative agriculture, with emphasis on soil microbiology and climate science. Her special interest has been nutrition of people and animals, and how the connection of healthy soil makes healthy individuals and a healthy environment. Also, how modern chemical farming creates avalanches of diseases and environmental decline. She is passionate about teaching healthy farming methods and investigating the roots of many diseases of modern people and animals. She is part of a couple of organizations, one called Regenerative Earth and another one called Carbon 8, 2 organizations who want to encourage regenerative agriculture. She has also written a book called The Food Solution and has her own podcast called The Regenerative Vet. She is currently studying nutrition for humans and offers consultations for people wanting to eat healthier. On top of that, she is mother to 3 now adult children. So there's quite a wealth of knowledge from Gundi here, and I think you can see a very common theme with animals and soil and agriculture and all things health related. So I guess let's dive in and ask the question, what led you to explore all these things, Gundi?
Yeah, that's a nice, good question. I've always been a nature lover since I was little. And I grew up in a big city, so it wasn't that I had nature all around me. Like we had a garden and we would go on holidays, and holidays would often take us to my uncle's dairy farm up north on a German island. And I just loved it. And whenever I would come back to this, and I'm not just talking a city, I'm talking a really industrial, ugly city, like the coal and steel belt of Germany. Couldn't get more industrial if you tried. And whenever I would come back home, I would cry because I just wanted to be on the land.
Oh,
Like, yeah. But it's just like been in me, I think. Probably it's in everybody because we all, like our ancestors, most of our ancestors would have been somewhere connected to the land, wherever on earth they were. So I think it's just a human natural affinity to nature, and I've never felt right in the city, so I always want to get out. So I was good at science, so I thought, yeah, I will be a vet. I'll become a vet. And so we had cats and animals around us, but every holiday, that I could go to this farm, oh, this is what I want, So I studied hard, got into vet school, and then the rest of my life evolved around being a veterinarian. So at the start, when you study vet, you don't know. I didn't know anything about you. Like you are born, on the land, so your knowledge is just innately there, because your mom always had. I've known Jess forever, like I'm a friend. And like for me, that was not the case. I had to learn it, but I was always horse riding, always. Like I could only afford 1 hour a week for my pocket money, and I would cycle 11 kilometers to get there. So I was really just passionate of getting there somehow. And the connection to health sort of started when my mom got cancer when I was 20 and I was at uni, and she changed her diet. And that's when I read my first book about the connection of food and health. And before that, just like I eat whatever somebody puts in front of me. I don't care as long as it tastes good, no idea.
Yeah.
And then that connection of food and health has been with me ever since, like now for nearly 40 years. And then I did my learning years in England, in a little mixed practice. And then I met Nick, who I married, and he was from a farm. So I ended up on this farm. And then through history being what it is, I ended up running the farm, and not really well, but I was suddenly the owner of the remnant of it with nobody to help me but me, and the bull operation we had, they were all gone, so, what do I do now? So then I thought, I've always been sort of like green. I love nature. I love the environment. So let's look into organic farming, which I did, and I'm not ever claiming that I was a good farmer or that I did it well, because I had 3 kids in a vet clinic, and no time and no money. But I learned first about the cattle more, and then I learned about the grasses, like which grasses we had and what time of year they're there. And my father-in-law, when he was still alive, he taught me a lot about the grasses, and then it went even lower, like into the soil. Oh my God, it's with the soil. So meanwhile, I'm running this vet clinic, and during the years, I've had my clinic for now 23 years, I noticed people becoming sicker and sicker, and then as my friend.
Yes, over that time of being vet, you could just see it in those 20 years. Wow.
Yeah. And it's like the little town where we're living is pretty isolated, so there's not that much around, so it's really, you see the people grow up, and there's not that people get out of here much, so they're living and eating and getting sick here in this community. And to follow that nearly sounds like scientific madness, to say this, but sort of you see the sickness unfold around you, and you think, wow, there's another one with an autistic child, and see, when I was young, I didn't know what autism was. And then you are too young to remember, but there was a movie with Tom Cruise and Dustin Hoffman called Rain Man. You might have seen it, like it was the first time that any of us, saw an autistic person, like it was such a novelty. And oh God, isn't that strange, And Dustin Hoffman played this man really well, and Tom Cruise was a brother. And so that's how rare it was. And suddenly, I swear, every second or third family that comes through my doors has got an autistic child. So that's one. The other is cancer, of course. Like every second person you talk to, has got cancer, either themselves or
I think the current rate is 1 in 3, isn't it? I think.
Cancer?
Yeah. Don't throw me on it, but that was the latest number I thought I heard thrown around.
Yeah. Yeah. Autism used to be 1 in 10,000 or 1 in 100,000, or, it was such a novelty to see one child with autism. And it's not that we were not diagnosing them. They are like, like you can't miss them.
Mm.
And suddenly, we have got, I think, 1 in 8 in this town, if not more, like which teachers can tell you the story, of behavioral problems. Then there's a wave of mental health, and anxiety, like that took me a while to work out. Like, why is that suddenly? Then one of my nurses and then another one of my nurses had endometriosis. I'd never heard of it. And by that time, I had 2 or 3 children. Like, I didn't have a problem. Like, nobody else had no problem my age. Like, mom didn't have a problem. Why does your generation have a problem? Yeah. So there's this question, and then polycystic ovaries. We didn't really have that either, Asthma. I had 1 kid in my class that needed a puffer. Now, like with my children, I had to like, are they allergic? Do they need a puffer? And no, my children don't, So what do I do right? What do others not? Why is this, So as questioning all of that. So all of this medical knowledge that I have, and then, dogs with ear problems. Oh my God, it's probably a food allergy. What's happening there? Then why do they have all these allergies? Like we make money from that, from the itchy dog and the scratchy dog. And yes, sometimes it's just grass, but why? Why so many? Cancer, why? Spleen tumors, why? And you really start to look, why does a cat get diabetes? So my critical mind got really triggered, and so then eventually it came all together. So it's like you need some time in life to work these things out, like, so there are all these sick people. There are the sick dogs. There is suddenly a drought, like let's add climate into this, like in the 18 and 19 drought. Why is this? What does that have to do with it? And then you start organic farming and the soil and water cycles and oh my God. And then it still didn't click, with me. I knew that it had all to do with food. But at the start, I thought it is just that we're not eating whole food anymore. Yeah, we are not eating the whole grain, but just the flour inside. And then eventually we all got gluten sensitive. We're like, why is that? Why do we get gluten? That like, no, that wasn't meant to happen.
Yeah, people have been eating bread for so long. Like,
yeah, like, so what happened there? Yeah. And all of these things. And then one day I heard a webinar about Roundup, about glyphosate. And that's when it started really to click, and that's quite a few years ago, like maybe 8, 9 years. I always used to ask people, so what about glyphosate? Everybody tells me it's fine, like the common knowledge amongst farmers, no, it's fine, like. And then I started investigating what actually happens on farms, and as you know, where we live, it's mainly cattle farming. And, cattle farms are normally relatively, if they're not overgrazed, and overdone, relatively healthy little ecosystems, like if the farmer doesn't put stuff on much, like superphosphate or urea or grows oat crops, where glyphosate or 2,4-D or something will come, like we can have cattle on farms where you still have your turtles and your frogs, and your snakes and your eagles, it doesn't necessarily. So that way of farming that I have always done here, like was quite nice, but then you look across the fence and then over the fence and you suddenly see, oh my God, what are they spraying with? Like, and so then learning about the intricate things about glyphosate on its own, started another inquiry. What actually does it do? Is it really harmless? I still had no idea, and then I investigated that. And not only that, I investigated all chemical farming, what does urea do when we put it out? And so the whole thing grew, what is 2,4-D? where does that come from? What happened there? And so bit by bit, this picture of what's actually happening and how it fits into the human misery, into the infertility crisis, the mental health crisis, the body crisis, the cancer, the arthritis, the thyroid problems, and then the water cycle's not working, the floods, the droughts. And then you get the picture, oh my God, I think there is something really wrong with how we produce food.
Yeah, so everything just sort of spiraled and one thing led to another, and before you know it, you've connected all these dots and ended up with this big picture. And I guess, is that what led you into writing your book, The Food Solution?
Yeah, and a lot of the research happened while I was writing it. It was actually meant to be a book about whole food.
Yeah.
And then it spiraled out of control, like when you start to suddenly look at, oh my God, what happens in the soil, when you put this stuff on,
Well,
and
yeah, it's a lot of big topics to cover, and it really can spiral. And I mean, you can keep going and going with it if you follow every trail and every crumb that you come across. Like, you're turning into, so many worldwide issues and things that people are looking at. So it is a massive area to tackle, and especially to try and write a book on. So there would be a lot that goes into it. But what did you find that was drawing your attention the most? Was it the soil in the end?
yeah, that everything is connected to the soil.
Yeah.
And to what we do with the soil, how we farm. And at the same time as I wrote the book, the drought was in full swing, so what happened there? And in our district, there's a lot of climate change deniers, and so no, we've always had, hot spots, and we always had cold spots. And yes, it is true, but it's actually changing a lot and very fast. And so I examined, okay, CO2, yes, it's fossil fuels, that we must stop them, because yes, definitely it's in the atmosphere, is denser and it doesn't let enough heat out, and we are slowly cooking ourselves. But it's not just CO2. A lot of it is water vapor as well. So where does the water come from? And then you're with chemical farming again, because 40% of the land mass on Earth is used for agriculture. And a lot of that is for intensive chemical agriculture. I went to India. India is absolutely dead. It's absolutely poisoned by chemical agriculture. It is like horrible when you look at it, at the miles and miles and miles, square kilometers of barren, dry soil. Then I went to Africa, and in Africa, most of the soils are poisoned as well. And the people that work with those poisons are sick. Yeah. So to understand that farming has got a lot to answer for, because it is that much land mass that we as humans are doing something with, and we have to eat, it's a lot of us, and we all need to. So how do we produce this food, and how do we produce the food without harming the environment? And could we actually produce food by being even enhancing the environment, or good for it, or at least come even,
Yeah.
So then you come to very simple principles, and one is that the water in the atmosphere, which works as a greenhouse gas, was released from soil. Yeah, because when you spray something out, when you come and with a spray gun and you put a herbicide like glyphosate or 2,4-D or paraquat, over an area of land, then there's nothing growing. And you can drive through this countryside and you can see it, it's dark brown, depending on how healthy the soil is, or light brown, but it is barren a lot of the time of the year because it's been sprayed out. And then something tries to grow and then it gets sprayed out again, yeah? So that re-radiated heat alone is massively contributing to the warming of the planet. Also, the water is not held by the organic matter in the soil anymore because the humus dries out. Yeah, and the humus gets destroyed by these chemicals and by urea as well. Nitrogen fertilizer.
Yeah,
and
so
super.
Yeah, so they're destroying the organic matter.
Yeah, destroys the organic matter, destroys the humus, which is a chocolatey black color, and destroys the microbes. Microbes are huge biomass. Yeah, so all of this dies now. Nothing holds the water in the atmosphere. Yeah. So the principle of having just anything grow 365 days a year, where you can, where you don't snow, like in Canada, you can't, but you always have something covering the earth, principle, really quite easy to do, and then build up humus, whenever you've got a green plant, you draw out carbon dioxide from the air and pump it in. So all of these natural cycles are gone, where we really do heat up the atmosphere. Nitrous oxide from nitrogen fertilizer puffs up in the air, and it's a greenhouse gas 300 times as strong as CO2. Yeah, so agriculture really is at the core of what you and I are trying to save, which is the natural world. And it's hard, though, to not blame people, like when you say, oh, farmers, you're doing it all wrong, and you're all bad. No, it's a system problem. This is what people get taught. This is what the shops are telling you. It is like sort of like a chemical. It still works somewhat, like you can still bring. So it's multifactorial how that all comes together. And we have no idea how to grow food anymore without chemicals.
Yeah, we've become so dependent on chemicals, and then I suppose it's also comes down to efficiency and economic decisions, and like you said, that's sort of the most common and potentially the most efficient way for a lot of farmers to do things. But like you said, perhaps the education is lacking, and it's a system problem, so the system sort of needs more work and a better solution to find for farmers to use that is better for the soil and in turn our food and our health.
Yeah. So to really get that, to explain this, what I mean, where the health thing comes in, like we all pretty much know by now, that sugar isn't good and that E numbers in food aren't good and that it's probably not good to have too many additives and preservatives and eating that, so processed food definitely causes disease, like McDonald's definitely causes disease, but what else is there? So I always say it's two big columns. One is nutrient deficiency, and I explain why in a minute. And the other one is pesticides per se. So glyphosate is a hormone disruptor. The hormone that makes testosterone into estrogen and estrogen into testosterone gets destroyed. So the consequences of having your hormones confused, that's pretty severe. Glyphosate also builds itself into your proteins, so into your hormone structure. So your hormones get destroyed. It's cancerogenic per se, and glyphosate, sue me for this, but there's a lot of evidence that it's really bad. But what also glyphosate does, it's an antibiotic per se. So when you eat an antibiotic with your daily bread, because a lot of the wheat is nowadays sprayed even out to harvest with glyphosate. So it's a lot of glyphosate in the grain, which you eat with your innocent bread. Yeah, you wouldn't think so, that oh my God, this bread is actually, eat that. And not only do you have gluten problems, but also the glyphosate kills your gut microbiome.
Yeah.
And that's another podcast. What does your gut microbiome do? It gets pretty obvious now that without it, we are so stuffed.
So how does the glyphosate get into the wheat? Because don't they harvest the crops and then they wouldn't spray them until after the harvest? So how would it be getting into the food?
No, they spray them dead because it kills plants. Glyphosate kills plants.
Yes.
And so when it is nearly ripe, they will spray it out. And then it will all die and dry out. And that's what a farmer wants. He wants to have dried out wheat. But before it dies, because grain is there to store the goodness for the next season. Yeah. So all the plant just pumps the grain full of goodness, whatever is left of it, and it pumps also glyphosate there. And then I always say it's like, maybe funny way of saying it, but let's say we put a horse to sleep, with the anesthetic, with lethal barb, and a dog eats that horse a year later. That drug is still there, and the dog will actually become anesthetized. So once an organism is dead, it stops metabolizing it. So, the grain gets full of glyphosate, then it dies, and glyphosate stays there, and then it is in your daily bread or in your cake or in your biscuit.
Yeah, and I've heard of this, how the chemicals, they can build up through the food chain. I mean, I've heard of it before, when people are poisoning a certain animal they don't want, but then that animal's part of a food chain. So then the next animals keep eating it and eating it, and it builds up in the system, which is a similar sort of effect. So with all your research, did you come across the solutions or the answers or any education that you're trying to spread?
Definitely, yes. Definitely. Like there is no two ways about it that farming like that cannot continue. You're like, what's the point in growing food when everybody gets sick? And the evidence is, like we're studying nutrition at the moment and going a lot into, like first sort of like PubMed, is a website where you can get firsthand, like science. And you look it up, and it's all there, like, yes, the chemicals are killing us. Nutrient deficiency, why do we have that? Because when you spray glyphosate on your farm, because it kills plants, but it also kills fungi. All your mycorrhizal fungi connections are gone, your algae are gone, and it kills bacteria and protozoa. So all of your microbiome in the soil is dead, but what I found in my research is that the bacteria, and then they get eaten by the protozoa and they get eaten by the earthworms, all that food web under the soil, actually, they are the producers of our nutrients. So if you don't have bacteria making B vitamins, all of them, B1, B2, B3, B6, 9, 12, they're all bacterial metabolites. Yeah. So if you kill them, your plant will not have B1, B2, B3, B6, B12. So your B vitamins are completely deficient. And what do? We pop a Barocca. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the other thing that is really important are all the amino acids, and they're the building blocks of proteins. And there's 8 that are essential. We must take them up with food. And they are, again, what I found, bacterial products. Everything starts with bacteria. And this is where, you would have learned that at uni, this is where the world began. The first living things on planet Earth were archaea and bacteria. Yeah, so those little things that we completely ignored, we ignored them in medicine. Eventually we found that, like in the 1900s, bacteria cause disease. And so from then on, bacteria were the bad guys, that we must treat with antibiotics and we must wash our hands. Don't get dirty, you get sick. And the opposite is actually the case. They're the first building block producers of life. Yeah. So then glyphosate comes and kills them, because glyphosate kills what we call the shikimate pathway. And the shikimate pathway is the pathway that makes the amino acids. So now let's take one of them, tryptophan. It's my favorite. Take tryptophan out of the food chain. Tryptophan is your building block for serotonin, for your happy drug. Yeah. And there is a connection to depression. Yeah. There's also the connection to the bacteria, the shikimate pathway makes a building block for folate. And when a pregnant mother doesn't have enough folate, she can have spinal, like neural tube defects in the baby. Autism, like neural development in the brain, all of these things, it's so intricate. And we just go in there with a sledgehammer. It's like doing surgery with a chainsaw. Yeah, like this is, like let's just kill it all, and then we add a little bit of nitrogen and, phosphorus, and something will grow, but you don't have any nutrients in it. Yeah. And now since this beautiful couple of ladies at UQ about 10 years ago, and I apologize for not knowing their names, but an American called James White picked it up, and he got electron microscope pictures, so cool, where he has got the bacteria that are in the soil, like it's a constant flow of bacteria through the plant, up and down. They go out again through the hair roots, which the bacteria form, so no bacteria, no hair roots. And then it's like constant flow of nutrients. Yeah. And in pictures of fungal hyphae, also constant flow of nutrients. So where we think the plant makes X, Y, or Z nutrient for us, like what makes the tomato healthy or cucumber healthy, it's probably also bacteria. Yeah. So it's really relevant if we kill them, because we kill that have got a shikimate pathway. Yeah. By killing the soil. No wonder we are all sick. Yeah.
Yeah. So we need to get the bacteria back into the soil.
Yeah. So the solutions, because you asked for the solutions, is let's grow 365 days a year something, because all the green stuff that's growing through photosynthesis shoots sugars so fast into the soil. Like nearly instantaneous that you have got photosynthesis and psh, it goes into the soil. And that is the sugar that the bugs need down there to eat, so they can munch and multiply and do the nutrients for us, So that's the first step. And then the second, like we do a lot of reinoculation of soil, with different bacteria. You can just take cow poo and cow urine, ferment it for a week, or compost teas, compost, just anything to add biology. And then it will sort itself out, and then your nutrient cycles will function again.
And stop spraying.
Yeah, I don't think you can really do anything else in the long run. I mean, the European Union is constantly discussing glyphosate. Monsanto, the maker of glyphosate, was bought by Bayer. And I think because they know that, the court cases that are claiming that glyphosate causes cancer will just ruin that company anyway. So there's so much evidence that we have to stop, but also, because you are a nature lover and ecology is now your thing, when you should get Matt Landos on this, he's a colleague of mine, a fish vet now.
Sure.
And when he starts to talk about the runoff of glyphosate and antifungal agents, which we also do, and insecticides going down the rivers and killing all the oyster beds. The industry of oysters between Brisbane and Stradbroke Island is pretty much killed by runoff from chemical farming. So we're not killing just the soil, we're killing everything downstream, and it goes down and kills the reef as well.
Yeah. So we're just learning about all these pass on effects from you're trying to target one thing, but you don't realize what chain you're setting off, chain of adhesions. Yeah.
Yeah. And insecticides, insecticides to kill against pests, let's say genetically modified corn with Bt toxin, we don't have to spray so much anymore because the Bt toxin is in the corn, will kill the attacking pest. Yes, but it kills all the other insects too. Where are they? They're gone.
All the beneficial and
beneficial. It doesn't discriminate. Again, it's like a chainsaw. Like doing surgery with a chainsaw.
Yeah.
And the insecticides also run off. But the birds. What are the birds and the frogs gonna eat if the insects are gone? And then the take over. So the whole ecosystem is very much destroyed by spraying chemicals.
And this is where I think, doing research and having a better understanding of the natural ecology of things can provide so many natural solutions. I mean, the bug problem, I guess there's not a solution that's going to perfectly fix everything. But like one thing I came across, for example, was a girl who was studying at a university, and she was studying, the control of insects in a vineyard by, the native bats that lived in the nearby woodland. So like nature provided a natural solution, but because people lack the education or, you need more research to show how these things can work. It's like nature's already provided something that you can utilize, but people sort of develop a solution that they're more familiar with and they know will work. So I think that's what's really interesting is delving into that there are so many other solutions out there. We just need to work out what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, so it's all, and I think, as a consumer, we can help those farmers, by asking for, organic or spray-free products, too. And I think if we just, in inverted commas, solve this farming problem, our world will actually right itself. I'm pretty convinced, that nature will have so many cool solutions, but it takes getting... Rather than we've done so much medical research, into the detail, step back a bit, look at it from above, what's actually here. And then the more we know, and let's face it, science is always like 1 billion years behind what nature, or 3 billion years behind, what nature has provided anyway. It functions without us knowing or not, but we have to stop destroying it all the time because we are too ignorant to understand the complexity of things, and I read an article the other day from a guy that has got a GMO magazine, and he said we will our population will be down to 3 billion in a few years because we are so infertile. Because and he gave advice. This was a GMO magazine, like genetic modified organism magazine, industry magazine. Like if you own a chemical company, get out because the lawsuits will kill you. So it's another reason, that we nature is showing us, like it's a dead end street where we are on at the moment. Like you must let everything heal.
Yeah, and I think people are becoming more aware of this. I mean, obviously, like you're onto it, and then you've got so many. Yeah, I think there's so many role models out there. So people are waking up and learning about this. So I guess people, they're evolving, they're learning. You've sort of learned the wrong way, and hopefully we're learning the right way, and things will turn itself around. So hopefully all this knowledge spreads and people try to take it on. But I think that, convenience is a big issue. And like the economical side of things, like I think, like you said, it's a system-wide problem. So I think we do have a long way to go, but it's good that more knowledge is getting out there and more people are waking up and learning about all these issues that we've created.
Yeah. And most things really started so nice, didn't they? I think I remember meeting this a woman in England, like this is probably 30 years ago. And she was so excited about plastics, and she worked for the company. And I was then already environmental. It's like, ooh, really? Plastics? But when we discovered plastics, it would have been phenomenal, like, oh
So
my God.
convenient, so easy.
And then the green revolution, when we suddenly started to put nitrogen fertilizer on it, oh my God, look at that grow, or
Yeah.
we put superphosphate on, and it took some time to actually realize. My father-in-law on the farm, he was a big fan of superphosphate, and he didn't know why we suddenly have only got love grass, which is a pest grass, like long, it's stringy, it's hard, it's a monoculture. So in hindsight, and then sadly he passed away, but what he didn't know then, what nobody knew then, is that superphosphate will kill the microbiome in the soil. And so then you are going back in evolution about 2 billion years, and you have got like bare dirt, and love grass is the only thing that will survive. So that had to be found out because nobody did things out of malice.
Yeah.
This, I think it's ignorance at best. Because now we know, there's no reason why the companies that are selling this shouldn't know what I know. It's not rocket science. And now I think it would be nice to have some responsibility to now say, okay, now there is actually enough evidence that this destroys the natural world. There is enough knowledge that the Bt toxin kills all the other insects as well. So now let's become responsible. And that's why I say ignorance at best. And now, of course, this is a money spinner. And that's a money problem more than anything else because it's highly profitable. And when you go and have small organic farms, there's nobody else making money apart from, the small organic farm. So that's where you have a system problem because we're living in a capitalistic, global society.
Yes.
And there's 10 food companies that are ruling the world, So Cargill, Frontera, Nestle, whoever they are.
Yeah.
And they are the same companies and the agrochemicals, and they're the same as the pharmaceutical companies, and these are huge companies, and they are running their own thing, and the money will spin, and one, like in my opinion, the agrochemical makes the need for, more agrochemicals that then makes the need for pharmaceuticals, and then it keeps spinning, so that is the system, and that we say it's extremely hard to get out of that, and then the human resistance to change, and we know that.
And the fear of the unknown, I think, and I think fear has a lot to do with it as well. Fear stops a lot of things, and the unknown and what will that like. But in the same way, it's almost like better the devil you know in a way because we keep doing this thing we know is bad, but changing can be such a challenge.
Yeah, and that's where psychology comes in, and theology and sociology where the farmer next door, you know, like you got to be very strong to be like a farmer that does something different, you know, like because you will get judged, you know, like, and I've listened to many farmers, you know, that try to do it differently and nobody will talk to them anymore in the pub, you know, so there goes our.
I
Go
think I
ahead.
am starting to hear though, like more regenerative farmers emerging. Like I know one in particular, and he started doing it because he started noticing the resistance, like the spraying that was working well for so long. After, I don't know how long he's been farming, 20 years of farming, he can see, over the years how much more he needs to apply to get the same effect. And then he's like, this just isn't working and it's not good. So I think that it's slowly changing and delving more into that space, which is good.
Yeah. And it'll be exciting. You know, the people that I know that are in the regenerative farming, you know, like into soil space, and suddenly, you know, there's a new lease of life because it's so exciting, you know, when you see soil change and then suddenly you get all of this cool stuff growing and you stopped poisoning and you start enhancing nature, you know, and you see the birds and the bees and the insects coming back, you know, it is utterly beautiful, you know. So I say with you, you know, like it is changing and so much work to be done there.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned runoff before being an issue from farms. How does that play a part in water pollution and ecological damage? Because in my line of work, you see a lot of farms or big cropping farms along rivers, and you see the rivers are very muddy, they're very brown, and you just think, these farmers are doing their thing to earn their living and provide this resource to the world. But at the same time, you just see the effect this must be having on nearby rivers and things. And yeah, do you want to talk a bit about that?
What I can tell you is when you chemically spray your paddocks out and you create your organic matter, you know, like which used to be like 20%, you know, on the eastern seaboard, you know, and now it's below 1 in most cases. Wow. So what is organic matter? You know, organic matter is everything that has sort of like died and it's now, you know, the dead grass and branches, you know, and now it made it into this jelly-like substance, super high in carbon, called humus. And then the bacteria and the fungi, they literally glue the soil together. So you can go onto a paddock, you know, like, or into your veggie garden or in your garden bed and take soil into your hand next time you're somewhere near soil, and then sort of like see if it sticks together or not, you know, or pull out some grass. When it's good, high organic matter soil, you will have clumps, you know, of soil adhering to the roots, for example. And when it's bad soil, you know, it'll just, you flick it in the air and it'll just all disperse, you know, like, and it's not aggregated, you know, so you don't have microaggregates and macroaggregates, you know. And when you do have through the microbes, the fungi, the bacteria, and the protozoa, they make this glue called glomalin, and it's glued together. And then you've got pockets for water, you know. And you might remember a few years ago, Woolworth had this really cool thing where they gave to kids they were like little plates, you know, like, and they were peat or they were soil, yeah. And the kids take them. Do you remember that?
Yeah,
and then you and then within no time, it just, you know, like went, you know, and it just sucked up the water and became from being like, let's say 3 millimeters high to about 10 centimeters, you know, so really high organic matter. So this is what good soil does. It absorbs the water and doesn't let it go. And it stores it even for the next season, you know. And then when you have got healthy soil, you have got all of this extracellular matrix around the roots. And then that is all glibbly goo, you know, where the water also sits in. So you've got a rain event and you can see it, you know, you drive around and it rains. And then let's say you have got a really healthy grassland, you know, where a farmer did rotational grazing and the humus is just there, and it'll rain and the rain will sink in nearly immediately. And you can nearly watch it and it'll stay there. And then you go to the river down the paddock and what water eventually will seep out. And that might take a day or two or even a week because it's got all of this humus to hold it there, and the root system and the hyphae, you know, of the fungi, the mycorrhizal fungi, you know, and all of that life in the soil is when the carbon in the soil, will hold that water there and then let it go really slowly and it'll come out crystal clear. That's nice water. So then you've got an industrial farming paddock where you've got nothing growing, or you've got every 10 centimeters or 20 centimeters, you've got a wheat plant or a sweet corn plant, but nothing in between. And you have the same rain event, that water will sit on top of, and the soil is normally hard as concrete. So when, like the people that are planting, and the tractor drivers, they will tell you that a regenerative farm, the plow, if you plow, you shouldn't, but if you would, like it goes through like butter. But the industrially farmed paddocks are hard as concrete, so you probably burn twice as much diesel, just trying to rip through that because it's so hard. So rain will sit on top. And then you get a little bit like an inch. And if it's at a slight slope, all of that water will run off and take the last of the topsoil with it because it can't go in and there's nothing to hold it. And that's when your river, like here in Inverell, the river is brown. Like why? Because it goes through industrial farming land, and it should be crystal clear. And the people that are old enough here to remember, before chemical farming started, the McIntyre River was crystal clear.
Yeah, and I've heard the similar thing when I was at at a community where you could see all the industrial farming and the farmers along the side of the river that's, dirt brown. And I remember working with some Indigenous people in that community, and they told me, they're like, the river wasn't always brown. They said it used to be clear, and I'm not sure if they're speaking from their lifetime experience or knowledge that's been passed down. But just the fact that it had been clear was just so hard to fathom because we're so used to, in Australia especially, there's so many rivers in the country that are brown, like that seems pretty normal. That can you just imagine the changes that must have occurred, when they used to be clear? It just seems like it would just look like a completely different land.
Yeah. And then when you've got a clear water, you have got oxygen in the water. And of course, the chemicals are taken with the water when it runs off, into the river. So what does glyphosate do in the rivers if it's an antibiotic? And, it kills the microbiome of the river. It kills the fungi, so all of along the edges, like on the banks, all of that detritus, and all of those natural things are now stopped. So then you get suddenly not enough oxygen and you have got sudden death. First you have got all of these, let's say, phosphorus and fertilizer, nitrogen fertilizer go into the river with all the dirt, the topsoil that really, you should have on your land. It shouldn't go down to the sea where it's lost. It takes millions of years to make topsoil, right? And now one rain event, it's gone.
Yeah.
So then all of that nitrogen and phosphorus fertilizer. So then you get algal bloom, and then you haven't got enough oxygen. So then they suddenly all die and they suck the last of the oxygen out and you get fish death in the Menindee. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like where 10 million fish are dead.
Yeah, you get those crazy death events. And this is where I think it's so important for people to at least have a bit of an understanding of ecology because it is, how the world works and how everything's linked. And I don't know, people develop something for, they develop a chemical to spray and, it does what they want, but then they don't realize the flow-on effects, or perhaps they don't care. But I think it's getting to the point now where it's showing you why you should care, even if you're not really interested in that sort of thing, because it all links back to our health, which is where your whole food solution book came in and all these issues we're seeing with people's health these days. So it is all so important.
Yeah, and it's not a fun. It's no fun living with a disease. It's just much more fun to live in a beautiful, healthy environment with a healthy body. And our minds are going, and then what do we actually grow and what for? So this should be another podcast, but when you look at where a lot of diseases nowadays are linked to too much sugar and starch consumption, like we know now, you shouldn't eat bread and you shouldn't eat biscuits and you shouldn't eat cake, everything like that will spike your blood sugar and your insulin, and so that is one big agricultural commodity that we're growing is grain, no, we shouldn't probably have that. The other big agricultural commodity is soy. Our babies are getting 30,000 times as much soy as they should have. Soy works as an estrogen, like a female hormone, put that into society, into the babies, 30,000 times as much estrogen as they should have. Then we're growing canola oil, and that is like so toxic, to eat, all the seed oils, like
And that's so
horrendous.
common. Yeah.
So common, so you put that together. What are we growing? How we're growing it? What are we eating? What does it do? And on nowhere is it actually any good, and the funny perverse thing then is that we blame cows, that have been on this planet, for burping out too much methane. And yet, and they do burp methane, and so do we. We burp methane, we pass methane as wind. It's all part of natural cycles. It's an above ground carbon cycle, and methane in cattle in healthy grasslands doesn't even reach the atmosphere. Because cattle create grasslands. Grasslands are the most biodiverse ecosystems. Am I right? They are superbly, really beautifully biodiverse, and you can enhance them through cows or through other herbivores in Africa or herbivores in Russia or, where but herbivores. And then we have grasslands and then transpire. And the grasslands transpire to cool planet Earth.
Yeah, and they are a big natural environment. Like you see the grasslands and the big plains. They're in nearly, well, so many different countries have them, and they have the big herbivores that eat them. So it's not just farming cattle. Like it is a very natural thing. Yeah.
And herbivores are so magic, with their, again, like my bacteria, they just all of this greenery through bacteria, so we must start to love our bacteria everywhere.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
It's such a big subject, isn't it? Huh?
Yeah, there's so much to cover, and because you've got your own podcast, people can go over there and listen to everything. I'm sure you're probably talking about the whole topic over there, whereas we're trying to cram everything into one episode.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are so many things to discuss. Actually, an interesting one, while we've been talking so much about food and health, I remember when we first caught up discussing this episode, you mentioned about germs in kids in the soil and how we're so antibacterial now. Do we want to talk about the effect of, good germs and kids and soil and that sort of topic?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yes, get your kids out and get them out early. When you go back in history, they were born into the dirt, and the more dirt, like dirt, soil, soil bacteria, animal, kids would have been wrapped in animal skins. There's germs all around us, but as I said, we have in the last 100 years, we've made them into our enemy. It turns out they're actually our friend.
And I guess that's, yeah, but I guess that's with perspective, isn't it? Because you might have so many like dirty environments you don't want them to be playing in. So you probably need to find something that's, a bit more reasonably healthy environment that you can let them get dirty in, right?
Yes. I think when we had towns, in, let's say, London in 1200, like 1,000 years ago or something, like it would have been a cesspit of human feces, and rat.
Yeah.
And that's not what I talk about, that's too many people on too small a space, not necessarily let your kid go down the toilet, but when you're talking about letting children be on healthy soil, out in the garden, and children naturally experience with their mouth, they will grab it and put it in their mouths, and don't panic, because most of the soil bacteria are absolutely what we need, so I always told my kids, like, have you not washed your hands, but before dinner, which is like, so in a way, it's so crazy, but you can see how in big ecosystems and in little ecosystems, it's all about balance. You have got too many lions killing too many prey, then you've got too little prey, it has to be a balance, like in our gut, good bacteria and bad bacteria, they have to be in a balance, or the good bacteria have to win that balance. And viruses, you remember during COVID when suddenly all the kids were kept at home for 2 years and they were kept away from everything and most people weren't even allowed to go out. Their immune system crashed, like, my clinic, how many children we have, and when they were let out into the public again, the kids just fell over like flies because they weren't exposed to any viruses anymore and they couldn't build up their immune. And so we have got an immune system and the immune system will take care of the bacteria. You've got bacteria in your skin, in your eyes, in your nose, in your breasts, in your brain even, in your uterus. And they should be there and they will keep you healthy. Plus, they make nutrients for you. They make GABA for you, which calms you down, So they make oxytocin. Bacteria in our gut make oxytocin, which is I call it the purring hormone, the like love hormone,
Mm.
your empathy hormone. It's all bacteria, like, oh yeah, I have fallen in love with them, and you can't see them, which is so hard, but you can see them, you put them under the microscope. So yeah, I think we have misunderstood that, So yeah, any healthy dirt, and get your kids exposed to nature as much as you can.
So trying to find those natural places to take them to, like a local national park or woodland or something.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so good for the soul.
Yeah.
And and oh, like nature is just so unbelievably wise. I have looked into the circadian rhythm lately, which is the power of sunlight. And it turns out that sunlight doesn't just drive photosynthesis in plants, but it also drives our mitochondria. And it makes us vitamin D. And if you don't have enough vitamin D, your death rate actually doubles.
Wow.
Yeah. So it is, and your immune system is dependent on vitamin D, and vitamin D puts calcium into your bones, and into your teeth. And so we have that again underestimated nature's wisdom of just how essential it is for us to be outside. And then you have got, the education system which says slip, slop, slap, like don't let the kids out. So most people nowadays are vitamin D deficient, so the immunity goes down. Depression is to vitamin D. Cancer is linked to vitamin D deficiency.
Yeah.
So
much
it's
conflicting advice.
yeah. It just we didn't understand, and now that we're looking a bit closer, like, oh my God, sunlight, infrared light, the full spectrum of sunlight. All nature, all the world is driven by sunlight, So yeah, I find that fascinating. Like, oh, okay, we found out again through some science how clever nature was already, and nobody told it, and it just does it.
Yeah, and that's what I think. Like I think that, nature's got it all worked out perfectly, and it's just a matter of people understanding it. Because I think and we're on our way to understanding more, but I think that's part of the problem, right? Like what you've been saying, we just don't understand so much, and that's where these issues come and arise from. But once you understand it, makes sense and it shows you the solution.
Yeah, and maybe we have to trust it more. Like I'm very scientifically trained, like you. And so we look through at the world through that lens nearly. And I think for a lot, and this is not just you and me, this is, I think, like our school system makes us that way. Like we're not trained to be in touch with nature and the spirits and with music and with the floating fairies. We're trained in math and science and English and, and chemistry and physics. And this is how we were sort of socialized. And so for a lot of people to get a real scientific reason, like why, for example, glyphosate is not a good idea, it's because it kills the microbiome, because it's a shikimate pathway which makes this and this. This is what happens to your body when you don't have it. So I now draw the conclusion that glyphosate is probably really toxic, and it builds itself in where glycine is. And so that, like it's all scientific reasons, to get through to, let's say, universities, to get through to everybody that's eating, like you must know this, this is why, because people won't believe you. If you say, chemicals and agriculture are bad. No, they're not. Prove me different. Like it's all about proof. Politicians, the United Nations, the European Union, like the more we have got backup in science to prove what nature has known anyway. There's another point for nature. Hey, have a look.
Yeah.
So it's for us to understand, so that we convince the world that we must look after nature. Otherwise, we're all stuffed.
Yeah, because we are a part of it, no matter how much we change it to suit us in our lifestyle. Like we are a part of nature, so it is important that people care a bit more and understand it better, which I think we are well on our way to doing. But it is hard to change what, current set ways and what people know as the norm. I think it is really hard to change that and teach people new things sometimes.
Yeah. We all feel it. I think innately, you put anybody out on a beach or into the mountains, into nature, on a crystal clear stream that flows down a mountainside, like
Yeah.
all of us will say, oh my God, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Like we know, our
Mm.
taste buds know when you have got really amazing tomatoes or a
Mm.
really good steak, like
Yes.
you take, oh my God, that's what food is like. So it's
Mm.
our senses,
Mm.
our innate nature always finds it really nice, unless we're too scared because we really do not have never been exposed to, and then in an increasing number of people, because you are born in a city, brought up in a city, nature can be actually quite terrifying, and so I would like to see the education system take kids really early, like really, really early and get us reconnected to Mother Earth.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, talking about in the future, so you'd like to see, after everything you've learned, where you'd like to see us go from here would be to, educate people more on this, so bring it into schools. And what else? Sounds like organics are definitely a good answer, and always having different plants in the ground year round.
Yeah, I mean, organics is just a name, like for growing food in the natural way without poisons, and normally when you stop poisoning, your soil hopefully should recover. But yeah, it's a trade name now, so maybe we call it natural farming or agroecology. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think starting to teach, like we have to help all the farmers that it has to be sort of from the grassroots. And I would like to see universities help, and I don't know if that's going to happen because universities nowadays are so dependent on money that comes from industry, so organic farming doesn't make anybody any money, like so I would like to see public money flow into that, to help everybody because it's for the common good.
Yeah.
Imagine all the money that goes from our politicians to the mining company, yeah, or all the unpaid taxes, and we put that in good, and because we must, like we will collapse society if we don't change our ways of farming. Because how is, like the predictions, the trajectory that 1 in 2 children will be autistic.
Mm.
Like, imagine that. Like, already I have heard that America can't find any soldiers. They can't, 93% of Americans are metabolically unstable. So where you're like talking about warfare, where are your soldiers? Like where your intelligent people? How are you going to look after that many autistic children? And this is what's happening now. Who's going to pay all the old women with Alzheimer's? Who's going to pay all the people with Parkinson's?
Mm.
Yeah, who's like we are so worried about immigration. Like the predictions are that we are so infertile, our birth numbers will drop.
Yeah.
So it's
Which is kind of ironic, isn't it? Because the world was facing, an overpopulation problem. And now it could be the opposite out of our own doing as well. But and I think it's easier for people to learn about all these things too now. Like you don't have to go and do all the hard research and all the digging. Like I've seen several documentaries on Netflix, that are easy to watch, really like easy. You don't have to be scientifically inclined to understand them. So I think there are a lot of resources now that people can use to do their own research and to learn about these things. So I feel like there's no excuse to not know about it anymore.
yeah, absolutely. Just this slight little interest, in it, that and also maybe even realizing how in dire straits we are. But also what you said before, that now we look at a muddy river, for example, as normal, the shifting baseline syndrome.
Yeah. Yes.
That we now think, actually, it's normal to have cancer. It's normal to have a sick child. It's normal to have endometriosis.
Because in our lifetime, that is the norm. But in the grand scheme of things, it's like it doesn't have to be normal. Like, it could be better.
And it was better when I was young. You're
Mm.
like, you have any of that. And we still had windscreen, insects on the windscreen. Now you don't, but now in the new generation, this is actually sort of accepted, as normal.
Yeah.
And
And I've heard about the shifting baselines before. Like I was listening to a podcast episode to do with health and supplements, and it was on women's health. And she was talking about the shifting baseline of iron, for example. Like so many people now are just deficient in iron, but because it's so common to have this low level of iron, it's become the new baseline compared to what it used to be. So it was just crazy talking about the shifting baselines and what becomes the new norm, which is a bit scary because it's not better. Like it's worse. So you
Yeah.
don't want it to be the norm. And
Yeah.
it's just interesting, how it all links back, and it all links back to the soil, and that leads into health and food. And yeah, I just can't get over the ecology of nature and things, and how it all links, and how it's so important to try and understand it.
Yeah.
Mm.
And then, the argument always comes, like, oh, we must feed the world. How are we going to feed the world? And um, somebody said that's the best marketing slogan industry has ever done.
Yeah.
Like, yes, no, we can feed the world. The world is so abundant,
Mm.
that yeah, we can, and what can we do? We can give the market signal, like, I don't want McDonald's, which is sort of sad driving through our town when you see KFC and McDonald's always full, like.
Both the convenience, isn't it? I mean, people enjoy food, but it's also so convenient.
And it's cheap, and we are in the middle of a cost of living crisis. So
Mm.
you go to organic farming and it'll be nearly double, so you have to be really inventive
Mm.
to try to find a way of nourishing yourself that's not going to kill you, because
Yeah.
all the cheap things are also nasty.
Mm.
Like, how do you do that? And that's a huge problem. You just.
Yeah, for sure. After all this, has there been like, what's the good things you've seen come out of it? Like, are there any hopeful signs or success stories that you've come across?
Yeah, I, in my own life, after, you remember the drought, and then suddenly it started raining, and I never thought this district would bounce back as fast as it did. It didn't take, and bang, the cattle are fed
It
again, and
was, yeah, it was amazing seeing the transformation. Like, you would never have known the state it was in a month prior, a few months prior.
yeah, absolutely. And that I will never forget, because there was, like, I had no hope, at all, and then, suddenly it starts raining out of.
Yeah. And when the drought does carry on as long as it did, it's just amazing seeing the resilience and the bounce back.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
tell me, I had frogs here right next to my house in the little creek. How
Yeah.
did they survive?
Yeah.
That it was just a little drought, it was a big one, and
Yes.
there was a drop of moisture. And then all the koalas were gone, and I had so many in the clinic, and they would, and then suddenly, like, koala sightings everywhere. How?
Yeah.
Oh my, so I see it in sick animals. You see
Yeah.
it in, like, our and nature's way to revive ourselves is
Yeah.
beautiful. And I'm reading at the moment about rewilding programs,
Yeah.
in the UK or in Yellowstone National Park,
Yeah.
in Africa, and
Yeah.
wherever we get out of the way and help it a little bit, like with animal management,
Yeah.
like, it just comes back so fast. I've seen farms come back and create, amazing organic matter in their soils in as little as 2 years.
Yeah.
You know, in India, what I witnessed there, like, when the farmers and the women started to do natural farming, no more pesticides, because of the farmers had so much debt and they just killed themselves. They had, I
Mm.
don't know, 400,000 or something, farmers killed themselves because of,
Yes.
the
Yeah.
debt certificates.
Yeah.
Then, and I interviewed a lot of those women, and they all told the same story. We were sick. Our children were sick. My mother-in-law was sick. Our land was sick. Our husband's kids, always the same story.
Yeah.
And then after, like, 1 year, not even, like, and I've seen those farms there. Bit of bacterial inoculant, bang, they've got something growing. They're making more money than before. They're feeding that food to their children. They've got some surplus, to sell to others, happy days.
Yeah.
And within very short time, all of their bodies recovered, their farms recovered, and now nature will recover too. And these insects and the birds, they will find you from somewhere, like, but would be good to stop now, if chemical,
Yeah.
or we have really destroyed too much,
Yeah.
it can still come back.
And it might be harder for it to come back. Yeah. So if you want listeners to take away one key message from this episode, what would you like them to take away?
Be really discerning where you buy your food. It matters. every egg that you buy that's organic matters. Egg is good. Egg is a good one to think, like you go to the supermarket and you're there like, oh God, that's $12 a dozen and that's 6. Can I really, So then when you think of that organic egg, the chickens are happy and healthy outside. They're eating probably worms and bugs, your egg is better for you. It has got heaps more vitamin D.
Yeah.
But the grain or whatever the chicken is eating is also grown on an organic farm. So on that farm, the farmer will not get sick. His children will not get sick. Hopefully his food is clean. And on his farm, birds and butterflies have got a place to live. So you have that little choice, like, there goes your cup of coffee, like also $6, so I do get it. Life is really tough.
Yeah.
And I think but the influence that one can have just with choosing your food is huge.
Yeah. And that reminds me of a good point too, that I think I had this challenge when somebody mentioned to me, about being more mindful of your food or organics or where it comes from. And I think I might have mentioned, but it costs so much more. And they just retorted with, well, how much is your health worth? And I think it's interesting just linking it back to your values. So if you can afford to go beyond the economic side a bit or find a bit of a balance, there are so many values behind that outside of the cost. There's your health, there's the benefit to where that came from, like you mentioned, and there's all these roll-on benefits and things that links back to us. So I think that is a really good point and something for people to consider weighing up. Yeah.
Yeah. And local food, like have it, think about food miles, and supporting local farmers. And it's just like, it's nearly like an avalanche of goodness that you create, like it nearly is like the best donation that you could make, like.
Yeah. And it might help change the system for the better sort of thing.
Yeah. And it's so much is food. When we think about how we grow food is the biggest destroyer of our natural world, and it can be the biggest healer, then might also help you make that, and that choice, I'm gonna buy that food that is now better. Like I go to my local store here, it's called Funky Monkey, so I buy the organic food there and I support that local family, and so that is direct and it's here and the money stays down, so that's another thing. And my answer always is when somebody says, oh, it's so expensive, say, pay now or pay later. Once your job is gone because you have got cancer, and you can't go to work anymore, like what my clients that I give consultations to now, like she's in her mid-40s, like cancer. Now she can't earn money anymore. It's expensive, and God, I don't want to get cancer. It's nearly inevitable that you will.
Yeah. And I think being sick is so much more costly than being healthy in so many ways, more than just money too.
Yeah. And if I would be the government, I would look at this really closely, because how are you going to pay for that many autistic behavior, neurodiverse children? Like
that's a
that
good point.
It'll just crash society.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah. So it will pay off. And floods are really expensive too. But it's a cost that doesn't occur to the people, like to the people that caused it, so yeah. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to look after nature.
Yeah, it definitely does. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's amazing, Gundi. I think we'll wrap it up on that note. But before we go, I love to finish up with an actionable step, that anybody or everybody can take away and from the episode. So do you have an actionable step that you might like to share that anyone and everybody could do from this? There's probably lots.
Buy pesticide-free food, like buy locally grown, or let's call it organic, food, and cook yourself. And you will eat a lot. Yeah.
Or even grow your own.
And grow your own, yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. 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 Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being with us, Gundi. And I will share some information about your podcast and your book so that people who want to know more and keep diving into this topic know where to find you and your resources. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your time.
And thanks for all you do.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Nature's Nexus podcast. I hope you enjoyed it and found some value in what was shared today. I look forward to presenting more knowledge and sharing ways we can connect to nature in future episodes, and hope you tune in with me to listen, learn, and act. Thank you, and until next time.